Often our self-talk will say, you're not ready. You don't have the time. You don't have the money. Why would you do that? What would your friends think? And so, really paying attention to what is piquing your interest and leaning into that without any expectations. Just check it out.
Hello and welcome to Self Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Astarte. Today, my guest is DiGeronimo. She's a 3-time award-winning author and former leading woman in the tech industry. Her work helps empower women seeking more influence and impact with proven strategies, mindfulness, and energetic practices. She's the author of 74 Key Findings to Raise Your Energy, Sidestep Your Self-Doubts, and Align with Your Life's Work. In it, she shares the strategies that helped her to infuse more purpose and meaning into her work and her life. JJ, welcome to Self Talk.
Thank you, Rachel. And I love this topic.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. It's like I'm chomping at the bit. But before we get into all the good stuff, we're going to talk about managing your energy. We're going to talk about raising your frequency. And what I love your phrasing here, leaning into your whispers, particularly in midlife. And we'll talk about that too. But let's start in a more general sense and how you made this leap from the tech industry to light work and mindfulness. How did that happen for you?
Well, like many of us, we have things in our life that push us when we don't want to be pushed. Some of us lose parents, some of us have relationship issues, sometimes we lose our jobs. And it really gets us thinking like, is this it? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this, am I on the right path? And I had many of those things in addition to having this inner turmoil that just would not give it a break. I mean, that just constantly was sort of urging me to seek outside of what I was doing. And late night, I had young kids at the time. I would find myself searching on Google for soul retreats and learning more about like, what is this inner talk and why am I not settled? And I think just those off the side of my desk activities was a real indicator that I was needing to explore more of who I am and why I was on the planet.
That's beautiful. And that is often how it starts, isn't it? There's an inner pull or a questioning that happens. So what can people do when they themselves start having that, what am I doing here now? What, is there more than just this? What can people do to start their journey?
That's a great question. I'm a human design. I'm a 3, and a 3 is about trying absolutely everything and then bringing back the best practices. And that's what I do in my books. I bring back the best practices of what worked for me. And in my third book, Seeking, I really talk about all the inner work I had to do to really have comfort on what my soul aligned to before I got down here.
That's so important. And I want to stay on that topic for just a little minute. Um, it's so hard to know sometimes, like, what am I being called to do? That's a big question. And so if we slice it a little thinner, um, what's something that we can do to begin to ask that really important question of ourselves?
Well, I'm a big believer, as I'm sure you are too, that you are exactly where you need to be. And the lesson you need to learn is in the situation you're in. But even with that said, there are things that pull our interests. There are documentaries, articles, TV shows, conversations, maybe an online course, something that you maybe browse through and you're like, well, that's interesting. But often our self talk will say, you're not ready. You don't have the time. You don't have the money. Why would you do that? What would your friends think? And so, really paying attention to what is piquing your interest and leaning into that without any expectations. Just check it out.
Yeah, I think that's also something people aren't used to doing is just giving themselves the freedom to play to say, yeah, what interests me, and letting that be okay, as opposed to, yeah, as you mentioned, what will people think? Right. And it takes a lot. It's one thing to accept it in our own life. You know what I'm thinking about right now is I love international detective dramas on TV. I'm addicted to them. I'll watch them from any country in any language, and that's what I'm doing. That's my downtime. And when I want to tell people that this is one of my favorite things to do, I originally found myself pulling back. It's like, what are they going to think, that I'm into watching all this death and murder and crime and stuff like that? But when we sit and we realize that's okay with me, I know what my reasons are, and it really doesn't matter what other people think. That's sort of like the next level, yeah. So the first would be ask yourself those questions of what am I drawn to, but the next would be discerning, um, you know, or taking ownership for being okay with that, right?
And it's perfect training for the work that you do, right? The study of the mind, the study of actions, the study that's pushing and pulling people. And I feel like that is perfect for what you do on a totally different scale, but it brings in sort of dissecting why.
Yes.
Why are people doing that? So, it might not be such a linear line for people to understand why you're being drawn to something, but I would just say trust your inner self, trust your inner guide to allow you to check it out. And as Jen Sincero says in her book, I'm a badass, or you're a badass, or she says, just see what you can do. Just see, because when you're just seeing, you have no expectations on the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads me to the next question, because we touched on it a little bit, which is this: we may feel comfortable with what we're doing or what we're interested in, but then there's that question, what will others think? So how might someone move um from outward seeking to inward seeking? The outward,
Mm,
like, where is justifying who I am based on how I show up in the world versus how I show up to myself.
Oh, it's hard. I'll tell you, I did it in, like, not directly, indirectly, because what I did is and after starting a women's group in 2008, after starting a corporate women's group, after writing my first book, 6 years had gone by where I was working off the side of my desk. And in 2014, I went into working on my own business full time. And I did not realize how much work I was going to have to do on the inside, because when you pull away your salary, your title, your participation in a team, how you identify yourself, it can get really lonely really fast. And our inner talk, our self talk, can really beat the crap out of ourselves. So I obviously would encourage anyone listening that you get ahead of that and not really throw yourself in the ditch like I did. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that I was going to be challenged with defining who I was. And I found myself describing myself about where I'd been and not really what I was doing, because I didn't have enough self confidence in my new line of work.
Mhm. Yeah. So self-confidence, yeah, just get some of that and you'll be fine. And then you're right. So, yeah, and I think the self-talk part of it is really important. Well, hence the name of this show, right? But it is a huge part of our path to self-acceptance. And when we listen to the voices. So let's go back to your experience. When your self-talk is maybe pulling you back, how did you manage that?
Well, I ended up at a therapist's office because I had no joy in my life and I was so down. I mean, I just was really down. And when I had gone to, luckily, I went to the right therapist because she ushered me to a mindfulness course. And even though I thought it was absolutely bonkers to go to a mindfulness course, because I thought that's what people do on a mountain, I was like, I'm in real life. I have two young kids. I have a lot of success. Like, I don't have time for this mindfulness stuff. And she basically said, go to mindfulness or don't come back. And it was the greatest gift. And I think we have guides along our path that guide us right when we're stuck or we don't know what direction to go in. And she was definitely a guide for me that sent me to a mindfulness class that took me a few weeks. It was an 8-week course. It took me a few weeks to really understand why I was there. My ego was just being like, no, this is nonsense. You need to get your grocery list done and you need to finish that chapter and you need. And it took me a while. My mindfulness teacher was fantastic. She trained under John Kabat-Zinn, and she was really great at really helping me let go. Like I had white knuckles on my notebook, my pen, my action list, my to-dos. And she really did a great job of letting me like unwind a little bit so that I could actually be part of the process of learning what mindfulness really was.
Yeah. And so what is it for you?
For me, mindfulness is the ability to be an observer of your thoughts. And I think of your thoughts very much like a conveyor belt. They just come by, some very quickly. And up to mindfulness, I grabbed onto a lot of the same thoughts a lot of the times. And I didn't really know that I could be an observer of my thoughts or have choice in what thoughts I was going to actually pay attention to. And I was just sharing with this my girlfriend this morning. So that was in 2016. It's been 8 years and I've been doing mindfulness. But I was telling her this morning, I'm really great at mindfulness until I'm in a fight with my husband. Mindfulness goes out the door. Then my ego kicks in and I'm like, and another thing. But I think, it is a work in progress. And I think you have the ability to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are an energy, a body, a connection to source that just can pay attention to the thoughts that make sense in the moment. And as the further you train yourself, the more you train yourself around gratitude, love, connectiveness, being part of something whole. It really allows you to shift not only your frequency or your energy, but it really shifts your outlook on why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Um, why do you think people have such a hard time with mindfulness?
Oh, because society and the planet is set up to not be mindful, right? The
Mhm.
television, let's just use that as example. Television. It's telling us a vision of how we're supposed to be feeling and doing. And if you notice, the television is all filled with fear, anger, disgust, disappointment. And that is not at all the light from above, like the universal light. Like that is love, gratitude, connection. And we are being manipulated at a very large level to live in the fear, the energy of fear, and um, living without and living just, in place of not connectedness. And I think that we have the ability to rise above that if we choose to do so.
Hi, it's Rachel here. If you'd like to dive deeper into your own self-development, but you're looking for an alternative to traditional talk therapy, I think you'll love the Foundation of Self Immersion program. For a full year, you'll get dynamic coursework you can complete on your own time, plus weekly coaching calls and monthly one-on-one sessions with me for personal support. Visit foundationofself.com and click on the events page for more information. That's foundationofself.com. Now, back to the episode. It's a process, is what I'm hearing from you. That it's not something that, yeah, I mean, it's wonderful. You had that mindfulness 8-week class and it opened you to a different way of viewing, but it is, and I want listeners to understand that it is a process. It's not like one class is going to take all the problems away. What does that look like for you? What does it look like to deal with? I mean, we all have negative self-talk that creeps in even when we're doing this work on our self-awareness path. How do you manage it if and when it shows up, or even some of those distractions that come in?
Well, it shows up all the time. It is
Mhm.
as consistent as it possibly can be. I'm constantly beating the crap out of myself. But now I recognize the patterns of that. And I'm able to say, not now, don't need it, need to focus, have to get this done. And I really just plow through. That's not a hot positive word. I really just allow, like almost segment it or containerize it to create the space of love, gratitude, and appreciation. And I've had to grow through that. As you mentioned, it was an 8-week course. It was 8 years ago. I've been working on this every week. And the easiest way that I've learned to work on it is to have gratitude for what's happening right now. And so that requires you to be in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you can be aware of the things happening around you. So even this morning, I dropped my son off to go skiing and I said, "Hey, have you seen a bald eagle fly over your head?" Because we're close to these metro parks. And he's like, "No." And then he just texted me when I got back to my desk and he said, "Oh my gosh, a bald eagle flew over my head." And he had to be present to see it. And maybe he hadn't been up to that point. But I'm grateful for the garbage collectors, for the gas in my car, for hot chocolate or hot coffee. You know, it's not the trips, it's not although those are very nice to have, they're far and few between. And I think for many of us, there's so much gratitude in everything we do. And so I'm constantly conditioning myself to be appreciative for the moment I'm in and the things around me. And that really helps me overshadow my fear. And I've stopped watching TV. That's also helped quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to talk about that gratitude aspect of it. We as human beings, because our brains are created the way they are and they want to compartmentalize and they want to fix things, we tend to look at what's not working in our life as opposed to what is working. And so I love what you said about being grateful for a cup of hot cocoa or coffee or whatever, the little things in your life day to day that allow you to say, hang on, things are not so bad. And in fact, are quite good, because we can take immense pleasure in the smallest things. And energetically, and now I want to get into the light work stuff and the energy stuff. Energetically, it changes our neural pathways, right? Because we're turning on, well, we're turning off the fight or flight, and we're turning on the resting state. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the importance of the energy. So mindfulness could be seen as a practice, and yes, it's spiritual as well. But what does it do energetically? How does energy come into all of this?
Well, I think of energy, I'm a computer engineer. So I think before I was analog. So I think of like FM radio, frequency modulation. What energy are you at? What radio station do you live in? Is it 87.5, 92.7, 96, 102, 104 point, whatever it is? It doesn't matter, but you get to control what radio station you're at. And three ways that I can control my frequency or my radio station is I pay attention to what I watch. Hands down, easy thing to do. If it scares me, if I feel yucky inside, or I don't really enjoy watching it, I don't watch it. I just that doesn't work for me. I pay attention to what I listen to. Am I listening to inspiring information, inspiring podcasts like yours? Am I listening to things on YouTube that teach me or inspiring me? I mean, what am I saying? What am I talking about? What groups of friends do I have? What conversations do I have at home, work, in my community? And does it make me feel good? Because if you monitor those three things, you can very easily raise your frequency. And a lot of times it's just small shifts in your conversations, your viewing, your listening that can make a huge difference. And you notice because things around you start to change. Because as you know, when you talk about what happens on the inside is really a reflection of what's happening on the outside.
Yeah. So it's like what we eat, it's we are energetically eating what is around us. So what are you going to fill your mind, your body, your spirit with? I think that's how I'm hearing it from you.
Yeah.
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 Being discerning. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I have to admit, like I was in the mud puddle in 2012. I was in the wrong job. I really didn't like what I was doing. I didn't have the right help at home. I was working way too many hours and everything annoyed me. And I complained all the time. And guess what? Everyone I was around was also complaining. So, like, I had to get out of that mud puddle one day at a time. And a lot of it came down to just paying attention to what I was paying attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's when you said that made me recall, I used to live in New York City for many years, over 20 years. And one time I was sitting outside of the cafe that my friends owned and we were having a coffee and they were complaining, because that's what New Yorkers do. It's a beautiful day. Yeah, well, yesterday was better. It's, constant complaining. And I remember having to consciously, like like pull up my light to say, I'm not going to get suckered into this desire to complain with the people that I love, because they were people that I loved that I was sitting with. But it's almost like it's part of the atmosphere of being a New Yorker. And at the same time, um, what you said is so important. We need to be discerning. We need to figure out like what's important to me, what's serving me in this moment. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And, people have come and gone in my life, and people that, I don't know, it's just amazing now. Like people that I've been friends with since third grade are starting to see the light, are starting to come in, are sending up me videos and talking about things that are inspiring them. And I feel like even though different relationships have come and gone for me, I still have such a core group of people that have been with me for my life. And little did I know back when I was in middle school or even grade school that some of these people would be on this very beautiful light journey with me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing. And those early connections that we make too. And people change, people grow and change, which is another topic that I think is important to just touch on here. When we awaken and when we start on this path, we may lose some relationships. We may, and some relationships may change. Some may end, or the door may close a little bit, and then they come back, right? So I wonder, have you experienced something like that in your journey?
All of that, all of that. And some relationships have been heartbreaking that are still on their own journey. But I would say that, God has filled my life with so many amazing people that continue to cross my path. And the people that I'm having conversations with now, like you and many other light workers and energy practitioners, healers, people with ancient wisdom, it is truly magical, magical. And I could not cultivate these connections if I tried. So I know there's a bigger energy at play that's making this so.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true. We always think, many of us think, that there's so much effort. We call it self work. I hate that phrase. I think it's more like self play and self adventure, and the unearthing of who we truly are. And everything you just said really resonates. That there is a much bigger energy at play that's holding us, that has us in its best interests. And our work is really just to remember that, to remember how connected we are and how powerful we are because we come from source or have that Godhead, God energy within us. Yeah,
Yeah. And as you talk about so often, I mean, really the only person that you can change is yourself. And
100%.
like the only thing you can really change within yourself is how you show up and what energy you exchange with people, with the trees, with people you pass on the street. That's all we have is energy. And what energy or what radio station am I going to work to be at? Because that's going to really alter who interacts with you and how you interact moving forward. And so, really paying attention to what is your energy level and how do you maintain that or elevate that?
Absolutely. And I say that, that's the bad news and the good news is like it's all on you. You know what I mean? Which is great. I think it's fantastic because as you said, so true. You can't change anyone else. The only person that you can shift and change and work with is yourself. And it's all about how, yeah, what station are you tuning into in your life? That's beautiful. I never thought of that. That's fantastic. So let's talk about your book. Tell us a little bit about how this book came to be. And the book that I'm referring to is the one I mentioned at the beginning.
Yes,
Yes, please
seeking.
hold it up for our video, Seeking, right? 74 key findings to raising your energy, sidestep your self-doubts, and align with your life's work. How did Seeking come to be?
Well, I've already authored two books and I really didn't have any desire to write another. They're a ton of work and I really didn't have any intention to write another book. But once I got on the other side of this energy, how to manage your energy, and how to align with your life's work, I couldn't hold it in. I just felt like I learned so much, not only about raising your frequency, but like, how do your relationships play into your self work and your lessons? What relationships do you have with your parents, specifically your mother? How do you view money? How does perfectionist fall into it? I mean, there's just so many things that I've had to learn in parallel to my mindset. And all of those things have brought me to a new level of awakening and knowing and alignment. And I really just couldn't hold it to myself. When I pitched the book to 6 or 8 publishers, all of them said no, all of them. So I shelved the book thinking, because they were like, this is a working book for working people, but it's also spiritual and it's got self help in there and all other things. And they were like, yeah, we don't know what to do with this book. I'm like, it's a bridge book. It's a get people over to the spiritual conversation. But no one picked it up. And so I put it on my shelf. And then about 6 months later, people started asking me very specific questions based on what was in the book. And I get a lot of leads and messages through other people. And so I just kept listening. And I was like, I got to pull this book back out. The world's ready now. And I decided to publish the book, take back my other books from my other publishers, and create my own publishing company for mystics and spiritual people, because it can't be that hard for us to get our knowing out in the world. And if I'm having a hard time after 2 award-winning books and thousands of copies, like, I just know there's an opportunity to help more people publish their books. And so that's what I'm working on next.
That's excellent. Wow. Yeah. And so needed, because what you said is 100% true. I've been a writer most of my life. 50 years I've been a writer, and I can speak to the truth of what she's saying. It is so hard to get into that industry, and no matter what, it feels like, if you're, in your case, you're trying to bring something that doesn't exist right now in publishing. You're trying to have people bridge the gap between the business world and the spiritual world. That doesn't exist. So yours would be the foundational book on that subject, and they can't see that vision. Crazy. But I love
crazy, but it's a crazy opportunity, because I think, because who I am and like the work I'm here to do in my human design, I feel like, well, that I've got to solve that problem.
Yes. And that goes right back full circle to what we started when we were talking about this, which is, you saw a situation that wasn't working and you changed it. Well, if I'm not going to get picked up by these publishers, then I will create my own company. I love that. That is exactly that. People have heard me go on and on about the foundation of self. That's what the core of my work is. This is part of the foundation of self work, which is to say, what isn't in the world, I will create. So I love that. That's a fantastic story. So I must ask, how can people find you, JJ?
Well, obviously my links are below, but you can find me on any social platform. And I think my passion project now is I'm working on a wellness destination in Lake Erie that has shown up in my sphere, something I could never have funded on my own. And I know it is just really been sort of put in my sphere because of the work I've been doing with so many spiritual beings and light workers, and creating a space we can gather on the water, which is so hard to find.
Yeah.
So hard to find. And water is such a big piece of our equation.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to, yes, as you mentioned, I will have all of the links in the show notes. And JJ DiGeronimo, thank you so much for being a guest on Self Talk.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Rachel Astarte from the Self Talk podcast. I'd love for you to send me your emails with questions or stories about yourself. What are you looking for? What are your questions? What are you grappling with in your own personal life that has to do with your identity, with yourself, with your very existence? These are the things that we're going to talk about during the podcast. And go ahead. It's all right. Get deep. I can handle it. So send them to Rachel@selftalkpodcast.com. And I'll see you on the next episode.